So first off, now that we're only taking 3 scores to establish, it used to be that you wouldn't have any adjustment based on the number of scores in your record. So we're only taking obviously the lowest score if we've only got 3 scores in our record, but now we're doing a -2 adjustment. These adjustments right here are becoming more prevalent, which this was not an option in the old way. All right? So what you want to take from here is it only takes 3 to establish. Okay. The differential is essentially calculated fairly similarly. The slope, the 113 divided by the slope rating times the adjusted gross score minus the course rating minus the PCC adjustment. All right. Clearly this is new. All right. So a lower score may not always produce a lower score differential. If we shoot a 95 with a course rating of 71.5 and a slope of 125, we end up with a 21.2 differential for that score, differential for that round. Consequently, we go and play a harder golf course from a scratch rating component with a higher slope, that differential is going to go lower, which is kind of what we see now. All right, there's really not a great deal of difference in this respect. And then clearly a 90 with a much lower course rating, and then obviously a much lower, not always, they don't always have to complement, but they usually do, the slope rating. So you can see that differentials, depending on scores, can be all over the place. So just because you have a particularly good score doesn't mean that it's the determining factor of that. Now, we're using 8 of 10 instead of 10 of 20. Here is essentially what a calculation is going to look like. The yellow is what it currently looks like, and the blue is what the World Handicap system is going to look like. Depending upon what your handicap index is, you could lose, you could gain. It's going to float a little bit. First round of next year, people are going to walk in. They're going to see what their course handicap is. They're going to go play. There's not that big of a change.
Course ratings and slope ratings measure course difficulty under normal conditions. But as every golfer knows, not every day is normal. Factors such as weather and course setup can change the way a golf course plays. None of these things should affect the integrity of your handicap index. To ensure they don't, a playing conditions calculation is carried out automatically for each course each day, provided at least 8 eligible players have submitted acceptable scores. The PCC compares actual scores against expected scores. If scores submitted match expectations, no adjustment is made. But if the PCC shows players have performed significantly better or worse than expected, the calculation automatically adjusts score differentials accordingly. The result is, a higher score on a tough day may still count as a good score and may be used to calculate your updated handicap index, ensuring it continues to reflect your ability.
When they do the green aeration and the balls are wobbling and everything.
Sure, that's a great question. So what about aerification and other changes to the golf course? Clearly, that would have effect on your differential for that day. Yep. If it has a negative or positive effect that day, then the playing conditions calculation would be part of that. Automatic. Automatic. Yes?
What happens if you have an event that day and people are playing who don't normally play, and the average, if they do post, I don't know.
Sure, like a member guest or whatever the case may be.
If the scores are much worse than usual, does everybody's handicap drop?
Yes, so the differential would have a stroke or two depending upon what that would be. So yes, outside play, you could potentially see more playing conditions calculation because of member guests is, well, particularly at NCR, you're going to have 288 players with 144 guests. You don't always play the golf course that you're traveling to as well as your home course. You're just not as familiar. So there could be more instances of playing condition calculations when it's outside of member activity. Very good question.
Like you said earlier, it has a small range, -1 to +2.
Yes, exactly. So adverse weather conditions, there could be all kinds of things that affect this. Generally, it's going to be adverse weather conditions. It's going to be spring, it's going to be fall. It's going to be kind of scenarios where, you know, that spring first event of the year, it's 48 degrees and blowing, and the greens are hard, and it's just not going to be a good round. So those type of differentials are going to be included, or that playing conditions calculation is going to be part of that. All right. So the PCC will be a simple conservative. It will be conservative in nature and adjust the integrals from -1 to +3. Right. So if you really think about it, yes, go ahead.
The playing conditions calculation will be done on the gross score. If you're doing hole by hole, we'll look at those, and those have a bigger influence than the total score.
So the playing condition calculation will be done on the differential from that day. So that differential is not a hole-by-hole determiner. Yep, that's a great question, and it was to your question earlier. Yep. Okay, so think about this in some respects. It's a lot harder to make the golf course play easier than the conditions to make it play harder. And that's why you're seeing what it is. Harder, faster golf course, easy hole locations. Yes, sir.
So basically what you're saying is it really has nothing to do with the conditions themselves. It's just if you have 8 players at your course that particular day or more that have an abnormal trend, that's going to start this process.
Yes, that's exactly right. So probably a better way to look at it is it's a playing conditions calculation. It's not an adverse weather condition calculation. Is that fair?
It'd be just a freaky day where, you
Yeah.
know, eight people play very well.
Exactly. Yes.
And going back to what you said earlier, if you miss the midnight deadline of that day and post 2 days later, even though you use the same date, this won't apply, is that correct?
So it won't apply to the calculation for that day because that's done at midnight. So if there's 7 scores that go in, you know, on Monday, and the 8th score goes in on Wednesday, those 7 scores don't qualify for a playing condition calculation. Now, if there's 20 scores that go in on that Monday, all right, clearly that day qualifies for a playing condition calculation. That is applied to those differentials from that day. Now, Wednesday, you go in and post a score for Monday because you got, you know, whatever, distracted. That playing conditions calculation is going to be applied to your differential for that day. So
If it's there, you get it.
if it's there, you get it. But realize you want to post it that day so that the system is more accurate.
But if you have 20, it's going to use an average of the 20. It's not going to pick out the worst 8. It's going to take an average of what the score is.
Yeah, I haven't gotten so deep into the weeds to say this is exactly how this happens. And I'm sure that we'll see that as we get closer. But we don't want to get distracted from the fact that this is ultimately what it's going to be. You know, there's going to be a lot of devils in the details, and we can get as deep as we want. But for the practical application, it's once 8 or more, it's available. If you have 100, clearly it's going to be a better determination of that playing condition calculation. So the more scores you put in that day, the more reflective it's going to be. Just like anything, better data is going to lead to better results. Yeah, John.
Okay, say you played Monday, you didn't put it in, you played Tuesday, Wednesday, you put the score in, and on Monday there was a PCC differential.
Sure.
Your index went down. That would influence your index on Monday or Tuesday and Wednesday. Did that roll through, or?
So that's an excellent question. So John's comment was, let's say you play 3 days in a row, and your score on Monday doesn't get posted. You go to Tuesday, you're going to play in an event. You've got the index from Sunday. Let's say that you played Sunday. All right, now I post Tuesday's score, but I still don't post Monday's score. Then I go play Wednesday, so my index, my handicap my handicap index going into Wednesday is going to take Tuesday's score and Saturday's score into account. So now I go back and post that score the following night for Monday. I've already played in an event on Tuesday and Wednesday that I don't have as accurate of handicap index as I should, but the water's already underneath that bridge by that point. It will obviously be part of the 8 of 20 scores as part of your handicap index at that point. So that's another reason you want to get them in, so that your index is as accurate as possible going into the next day's play. Depending upon the event and depending upon when that index for that event is used. You're not always going to take the day before. Just logistics, and I'll talk to that in just a second. Yes?
So now the handicap is actually live, it's not updated twice a month?
Correct. It's essentially what your trend was is what you will use every day now.
Okay.
All right. Now, obviously, there's a lot of burdens from an admin standpoint, printing scorecards and those kind of things. So depending upon the facility, they're going to set dates ahead of the day, that midnight. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there going to be a place in like score history where you can see that this calculation has been added to the score?
I am told that the playing conditions calculation will not be, but the exceptional scores and the hard and soft caps will. Only on that day, acceptable scores submitted to the golf course, including all rated tees in both genders, requires at least acceptable scores, handicap index of 36 or below. Clearly, there's more volatility for the higher handicap indexes in the world. It is applied to the calculation of the score differential for all players. It includes both 9 and 18 hole acceptable scores.